I was like, the face on that with the beak and beady eyes sort of thing, it may work. And maybe the pose, with the wings and could be there, but who knows? Normal pose is what I do. You will see that I don't generally stick dynamic poses and things. Again, there's a nice pose for a bird, and then put the monkey with a turtle, of all things. Oh, a sloth monkey turtle thing. But obviously it's not going to be a sloth, it's going to be a monkey. So I could give that a tail. Because I never knew sloths didn't have a tail, actually. It might have another one. But sloth. Because they hang about in trees. And again, the sloth sort of shape. Again, here we go. There's a nice monkey. Got his tail out. We could have wings here. With a beaked face. Ooh, ideas. I found this book, guys. I've had this book for a while. I knew I had it, and I was looking through all my stuff to get myself ideas. I'm looking for a turtle that I could do for a shape. Toucan, you can. Everybody can. Yeah. So I found a lot of. Oh no, we've run out of animals. There's a beetle. We're going to beetles. We don't want a beetle. Then again. If there is an animal in this book that you, why would you do that? No, I don't want. That's like the freaking worst thing. You put an earwig because that's what they're. No, thank you very much. Get in your ear and stay there and have a good old party. I can't find turtle, which I like turtles. There's a spider though. Hello, spider. Yeah, I found this book many years ago, but when I was practicing, in fact, for my first ever wool project, they wanted a mural, and I was like, I don't a mural. Okay, well, I'm going to need reference that I can carry around with me. And there was no mobile device or tablets, so I'm still looking for stuff here. No tablets, so you had to carry around books with you, and it was a pain in the ass when you're on a motorbike, guys. I tell you that now. But aha, we found a turtle. Right, I could technically take a picture of these three, and then again, I suppose the shell is all I need, but I know a shell of a turtle. Only turtle in this book as well. I'm going into cars now. Damn. Swordfish. Any animals that you guys would like to pick, you can let me know in the comment section. Aha, another turtle, same one. Yep, okay, right, no turtles in here then. Oh, look, and cars. Well, we don't need cars, so let's get rid of. Unless he's done a turtle somewhere there. No. I've had a request for a horse. The turtle. Right, we need to bookmark these buggers. A rabbit. I've had a request for, what was it, a horse and a butterfly. And, we'll go, oh, everybody knows what a horse and a butterfly is. That would be a unicorn without a horn. Pegasus, in fact. So, I would like to do something original. I'm going to be doing a turtle with ink, but I will be doing that horse. I might do that next time, as in they already have had two. I already had two already. Oh, that turtle's good. Already had two. That's my phone going off. Requests. So I might use that as the first one is this month, and the second one's on the second week of the month, and do it that way. But so give you guys time to leave some comments over on Instagram to what animals you want to have. I really need some music. What about you? What do you fancy? If anybody's watching, then let me know what you'd like to listen to. Otherwise, you can in future streams. If you've seen this, if you've watched back and you want to know, want to have some certain things playing in the background, I generally just pick anything now. There is no what would have like a comic in the background. I can't think of a comic that would sort of go with this, other than the powers combined too, or some sort of Pikachu sort of. I suppose a fusion video, but this is a kind of a fusion video, and that's what I'll be trying to do. Just bring back the camera, bring out my book, and get you in position, because I've got myself a new mechanical pencil. Yummy. Yes, can't even see that. A new mechanical pencil, as when you press in here, good think, the lead comes out there. Yes. Right, so I've got on my old sketchbook, which I have, again, guys, done a lot of pictures from previous, and I'm going to have to move a lot of stuff around in a second. I could have just got a reference off the internet, but I'm trying to stay off copying other people's work, other than stuff I've already looked at for many years, as that is a very old picture. Not the ones up here, the ones you were looking at a moment ago. These are mine from last year. And again, I want to get these. Well, this is my main character, and I want to get another new character for him as a sidekick. He's going to be coming out of the staff, so he's kind of like a genie type, could he possibly. I want to sort of stick him there and make a big like scene as I open the book, but that's coming up in the year, guys, so keep tuned for that one. But yeah, I want to give him a sidekick, and I've also got a pet animal or a steed, possibly for the sidekick. But I think if the sidekick comes out, the thing is a big old process at the moment while I'm thinking this, because I'm going to be trying to animate as well, coming into the new year. But I also will be sort of trying to maybe draw this in a VR state, as I'm making my full person standing up and a character in my world, which I'll be building in my VR world. Again, guys, I only will be doing paper sort of designing, I would think. Designing here on a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, all done on paper. We'll be inking tomorrow if I get any sketching done at all today. Spider-Man, and then on a Thursday and a Friday, we'll digitize, and that's what I've done to all of these pieces. I took a picture of it on my tablet and then digitized afterwards. Check those videos out, guys. These are all in a playlist. This was Fire and Fire Mugs, and then we get to obviously the dedication to Stan Lee, which was a horrible thing to find out last year, guys, or a thing to happen, should I say. And there will be new games coming, which is Spyro the Dragon. So definitely, and you can check that video on how to draw like this one here over on the earlier videos from last year. And obviously, then we got to the holiday time. So keep those in mind for next year, guys. Maybe I'll have something else to listen to and look back on old memories. But there's new memories to be made. I've still got quite a few pages in my book. So let's fill them up with my new pencil, which is of the mechanical kind. I had to buy myself a new pen because my old pen had run on out, which wasn't the thing. Black pen was the fine line, and it was beautiful. So we lost 2 people. No, we won't say it like that. Right, we'll get rid of that pen. I keep it around because it does have its moments when it still works, just at that point where it needs a bit of a darker tone, which is what that pen is. But inking is tomorrow. So we'll tune back tomorrow, guys. I'll be a bit earlier. Today is just sort of concept first day ideas and telling you what I'm going to be getting up to. I'm going to be starting to sketch in a moment. I am just moving some things out of my way and probably going to get something playing in the background. We've got sort of combining. This is more of a universe, and that's what we'll be listening to. We may listen to some X-Men as well, or just whatever I fancy in the background. So if you guys can't hear it, or you would like it, it is there. So when I'm drawing, there is no dead air. I will give you sort of an explanation when I'm going, but a lot of the time I'll just sort of be carrying on with it, listening to what I'm doing. So if you guys want to leave me a comment and have a chat, you can do. I can still see the comments, and I will reply to everything that comes up. Don't be too rude. Don't be too crude. But just leave a nice comment or just say hi.
Over 150 different cartoons share one massive universe. Recently, Cartoon Network aired an amazing OKKO Let's Be Heroes special called Crossover Nexus that included a fun team-up between current Cartoon Network shows. This special was jammed
so let's get on
just a classic Cartoon
with
Network
the
and implied a
turtle.
between all of the
So I'm going to get a basic shape of a turtle first, which in that book shows me how. The turtle you just saw, so I did like the turtle idea, so I'm just going to shift you around a bit more here, guys.
We'll lay out how almost all
see what there's my thing. And will I be doing it sideways to where you can't see me? There we are. What I'm going to be doing is trying to draw that turtle up there. And hopefully I will. But it won't be the full turtle. I just want the shell, to be honest with you guys. So I'm going to be trying to do a monkey hand as well. So if I was to do them upside down, maybe.
It utilized and referenced countless Cartoon Network series and created a perfect jumping off point for our massive shared universe. First, let's
put them upside down.
Cartoons that cross over into
yeah, so I'm just going to be following what's already in that book. If you guys want to see more of that book for explanation on how to do certain things, let me know. And I think I've done them a bit higher. And I will I'll do more of a explanation on how to draw.
Speed through this list. I am Weasel.
That's a big rubber, actually. Go for the pencil. Nice. It seemed a bit low. I'm going to be trying to make it into a scene of some kind. So I suppose it's going to have a tree if I was going to do
Courage the Cowardly Dog, Generator Rex, Megas XLR, Jor-El's brother,
tree.
Time Squad, Evil Concarne, Codename Kids Next Door, Robotomy,
can never do close trees.
Squirrel Boy, Camp Island, Camp Laszlo, Apple and Onion, Craig of the Creek, Sheep in the Big City, Mike Fu and On, Out of Jimmy's Head, Long Live the Royals, Villainous, Wacky Races, Mighty Magisaurus.
I like the sloth idea with the turtle. You see what I mean?
The Amazing World of Gumball, Regular Show, Ed, Ed and Eddie, Over the Garden Wall, The Moxie Show, We Bear Bears,
It's okay,
guys. Turtle mouth. You can fly. So that's basically.
Holy crap. That's an insane number of shows, but we're only just
getting
baby
started. Turtles here.
Strap in! This was actually OKKO's second ever crossover. The first was with none other than Captain Planet and One Planeteer. Kwame, they brought back LeVar Burton. It was awesome. One of the most popular series in Cartoon Network history is Powerpuff Girls, and that show has some pretty fun connections itself. Hell, earlier this year, it was established that popular animated band The Gorillaz exists in the Powerpuff Girls universe, as the new bassist for Gorillaz is none other than Ace, leader of the Gang Green Gang. What a time to be alive. Powerpuff Girls also connects to the Super Friends in this classic Cartoon Network bumper. It's also connected with Samurai Jack, which takes place in a dystopian future. In one episode, Jack actually walks through the ruins of ancient Townsville. Samurai Jack also connects to the shows Quick Draw McGraw and Two Stupid Dogs. Now let's back up again to the part of the crossover nexus that showcased the Buzz Wagon. The Buzz Wagon is, of course, a vehicle from the Hanna-Barbera classic Wacky Races. Now that we've got one Hanna-Barbera cartoon in there, we can loop in pretty much all of them, thanks to Birdman.
Birdman! Right.
Birdman later became Harvey Birdman, attorney at law. Now
this is not a bird. This is a turtle, monkey.
With almost every Hanna-Barbera.
I think that's going to look a little bit too sloppy.
For another long list that we'll read through as quickly as possible. Johnny Quest,
a monkey,
Yogi Bear, Jabberjaw, Flintstones, Dynamite, Secret Squirrel, Ancient High Pirate, Bernie Devlin, Speedbug, Wally Gator, Great Big, Quick Draw McGraw, Wacky Races, Godzilla, The Amazing Chan and the Chan Clan, The Herculoids, Thundar the Barbarian, Moby Dick and the Mighty Mightor, Help! It's the Hair Bear Bunch, The Funky Phantom, Hokey Wolf, Willie and the Copper
I'll have a bigger version of it here, but
Cartoon Show,
yeah, I'm looking this already.
The Koala Show, Magilla Gorilla, The Jetsons, Super Friends, Yaki Doodle, Top Cat.
This is just going to be
Shazam, Adam Ant, Breezely and Sneezely, Squiddly Diddly, Snagglepuss, Loppity Loop, The Hillbilly Bears, and the Huckleberry Hound Show. That is a lot of cartoons. All of those are real, I promise you. Moving back into
concept idea. So I need to see that monkey's face. So I need to mark this purge. Oh shit! I need to mark the page. Right. Right. I've got some sticky glue here. I'm gonna mark this page. I'm gonna mark it good. Right.
Earlier this year,
mark this.
Post-credit scene showcased the old
stick him together like that. Let's go back to the animals all around.
We think we found a way back.
Oh no, they found a way back. Right, where's that Monko?
Crossover special.
Oh, Monko, where you going,
DC almost go
Monko?
back to the Teen Titans world instead of the Teen Titans Go world. Plus, Teen Titans Go connected with the 1960s version.
That's a nice butterfly there for next time.
The Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure.
Oh, butterfly horse.
The 2016 version of the Powerpuff Girls in a crossover.
Tiny. Oh, yes, I've had another idea for that one.
Teen Titans Go universe has their own version of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In a couple of different episodes, we see these funny-looking iterations. One of them is being played by Greg Sipes, who played Michelangelo in the 2012 version of the Turtles. Now, something else we know about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is that they also exist within a multiverse, just like the Teen Titans.
Behold, a multiverse of accursed Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles!
In 2009, a TV movie called Turtles Forever connected the 1987 TMNT series to the 2003 TMNT series, and even threw in the original Turtles from Mirage Comics in black and white. Then in 2016, an episode of the 2012 TMNT connected that series to both the Mirage Comics and the 1987 cartoon show. In our opinion, establishing this multiverse means we can connect every version of the TMNT into our web of cartoons here, including this year's new series, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And for fun, we'll even loop in these versions of the Ninja Turtles from the BoJack Horseman universe, who seem to just be honest, hardworking sewer maintenance workers. You know, cut them some slack. And if you want to get crazy, and why the not, we can add then the live-action TMNT show The Next Mutation, which also definitively ties in Power Rangers in space and the entirety of the Power Rangers franchise. That web is getting pretty big, but we aren't done yet. Jumping back into our Hanna-Barbera web, let's look at Johnny Quest. This series ties to a couple of random properties. Tom and Jerry crossed over with Johnny Quest, and even stranger, Tom and Jerry crossed over with The Wizard of Oz and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Who knew? Tom and Jerry. And an older version of Johnny Quest also appears in Venture Brothers. And let's not forget to point out that our web now includes David Bowie. Thanks, Venture Brothers. Most interestingly, Johnny Quest also ties to The Incredibles 2. You can actually see a billboard for Quest Airlines in the city of New Urbam in the exact same font as the Johnny Quest logo, tying the universes together. And I know that within that movie, they were watching a cartoon show of Johnny Quest, but that doesn't mean that Dr. Benson Quest and his family couldn't have a cartoon show based on their real-life exploits within the Incredibles universe. We've solved it. This means that the entirety of the Pixar theory can also loop into this web. Yeah, you heard that right, baby. We're consuming the Pixar theory right into our big-ass connected multiverse. That adds every Pixar film to the web. You've got all the greats, The Good Dinosaur, Cars 2, they're all in there. Next, let's branch off the classic Hanna-Barbera cartoon Scooby-Doo. They've had crossovers with Batman, the Brave and the Bold, and characters from the WWE have also made appearances. WWE also definitively ties to G.I. Joe through Sergeant Slaughter, and G.I. Joe connects to Transformers when Cobra Commander appeared in that show. Scooby-Doo also crossed over with Josie and the Pussycats, which loops in Archie and Sabrina the Teenage Witch. The Scooby-Doo gang has even crossed over with the Harlem Globetrotters, and a future version of the Harlem Globetrotters have also appeared in another popular cartoon, Futurama. Here on this very channel, we previously discussed that Futurama likely shares a universe with Disenchantment, as seen here, and they also had a crossover with The Simpsons, of course. The Simpsons has had a huge number of crossovers with classic cartoons. The Family Guy...
All right, so what I've done here, guys, is
The Critic has made an appearance on
sort of trying to put the monkey's face with the beak for now. Again, you can't really see the detail. We'll take a picture and post it onto Instagram, but it's in the very rough stages. Sorry, guys, in the rough stages at the moment. God's sake, every time I talk, I bark. Not bark. Here you go.
Also featured Bart Simpson in the 2010 episode of their show, and even had Simpsons characters appear as recently as...
I do very much apologise. I got hiccups a lot, and I don't know why. Wow, it could be the broken ribs I had a couple of years ago. Who knows? Yeah, so I'm trying to do a turtle's body. It has like a hexagon type motif to it, doesn't it? So I don't know how that would work there. Propane accessories. Do you like propane? Would you like some I can't do that voice. Most no. Propane accessories.
I'm the one who brought you. Tell us what's going on, or I'm gonna scorch you flat.
Backing up a bit, the inclusion of Rick and Morty can connect us to Gravity Falls. After Grunkle Stan loses his mug, pad of paper, and pen in this portal, we see them drop out of a portal in an episode of Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty can also loop in My Little Pony, which featured pony versions of both
My Little Pony, skinny and bony.
This totally allows for pony versions of
Locked
these
in the
characters.
cupboard.
Also ties us to the series finale.
And
of
we
Pizza
won't
World,
tell you
which
the
showed that these
rest.
characters travel through multiple different worlds in a quick little fun sequence. This also saw the worlds of Pickle and Penny, Wander Over Yonder, and Star versus the Forces of the last element of our cartoon universe.
Now that's stuck in my
Scooby
head.
and Shaggy made an appearance in the film Looney Tunes Back in Action. This loops in the Looney Tunes universe, which ties us to films like Space Jam and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Roger Rabbit ties it to
But the
Disney
beauty
and Mickey
can't
Mouse,
remember
which
the
ties it to
words
Bob
to
the
the
Cat,
Space
and Kingdom Hearts.
Jam.
And a goofy movie. Kingdom Hearts brings in the entirety of Final Fantasy. Looney Tunes also connects
Looks
with
a bit like a grenade.
Batman, Pinky and the Brain, and even Freakazoid. Plus Prince, and it even gets more fun. Freakazoid had a
Got a
great little joke
wing, we
with
got
Batman
to
from
go.
Batman the Animated Series. Bringing Batman the Animated Series into the mix also
looking
lets
like a
us look at the
crow.
entire DC animated
Oh, maybe
universe.
if I get
That's
the
right.
wing.
Superman the
Wing
Animated
on a
Series,
flying
Batman
bird.
Beyond,
Where is that
Project,
parrot gone?
Justice League,
I
Justice League
wish I
Unlimited.
knew where I put the
This
parrot.
is
There's
insane.
not what the
Look at all of
one.
these shows. I cannot
But
believe
it
it.
actually is standing on the thing like I wanted it with this monkey feet.
Cartoon Network. They solve cartoons. There's no reason to watch any of them anymore ever again. You hear that, AV Club? No fun for anyone. Now look, we definitely understand that most of these are just fun animation Easter eggs. But all
Oh no, I lost the parrot. Where did I put that thing? Desert
The
animal.
Ninja Turtles could visit Gravity Falls. Hell, the DC animated universe could battle the Marvel animated universe.
Why is a turtle in the desert?
Pretty cool that you can
Little
actually
turtles can't
What do
swim.
folks
You
think
just
about
drowned a
this massive
turtle.
conspiracy of cartoon connectivity? Was it fun to see how all of these different shows are connected? Or did we just ruin
That was
cartoons
a
forever?
skunk.
Were there any
Like a
connections that we
skunk.
missed?
Le Pepe. Le
Let us know below in the comments. And if you like this giant cartoon web we made, head over to Nerdist.com to take a closer look. And as always, do not forget to check out Talking Tunes. Rob Paulson, who's in like 20% of the cartoons we mentioned today, has the best voice actors out there discuss their careers and read fun scripts. New episodes of Talking Tunes drop every Friday on ProjectAlpha.com. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to another animation investigation. If you like this case, do not forget to comment, like, subscribe, and ding the notification.
Understanding. Aha. So that's what happens with the parrot. It has a tail. We'll put that tail in.
As the old saying goes, no one stays dead in the world of Marvel Comics except for Uncle Ben. Resurrections have really come back into fashion with comics after a brief, apparent flare of popularity 2,000-ish years ago. But not every Marvel superhero or villain has been the recipient of a decent resurrection. For every well-conceived revival that inspires engaging new storylines, there's an equally confounding and frustrating one that inevitably makes readers ask why this character was even killed off in the first place. But in the meantime, I'm Will for What Culture, back from slaying whites beyond the wall to bring you 5 Marvel resurrections that were done right and 5 that sucked. Bad resurrection number 5, Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch. As the youngest member of Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four, Johnny Storm, aka Human Torch, has long been portrayed as an immature show-off, the superhero equivalent of Peter Pan, the boy who wouldn't grow up. During his acclaimed run on the Fantastic Four in the late 2000s, writer Jonathan Hickman finally forced Johnny to grow up. In Fantastic Four number 587, Johnny sacrifices himself and protects his teammates from a wave of invading aliens and is presumed dead. Storm is then revived 8 months later in Fantastic Four 600. In this issue, we learn that Johnny was kept alive by insect-like creatures that were implanted in his body by the villain Annihilus as a means to open up a portal to the negative zone. Johnny's resurrection wasn't poorly conceived as much as it was painfully obvious and anticlimactic. It came at a point where Marvel was seemingly killing off and reviving a new character every month. Additionally, because Fantastic Four ended at issue 588 and a new series FF took its place, many readers assumed something related to Johnny would happen within 12 issues in time for FF to be renumbered as Fantastic Four 600. It made the whole storyline come across as a cynical stunt by Marvel to rekindle interest in the Fantastic Four franchise. Good resurrection number 5, Hawkeye. The death again of Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, might sound a bit convoluted on paper, but it finds its way into the Resurrection's done right side of the ledger based on the unique circumstances of the revival, as well as some of the really interesting stories Hawkeye's return generated.
This is a strange character and it's not looking very good.
The Kree warship appear in Avengers 502. Hawkeye is killed during the ensuing battle when his quiver of exploding arrows catches fire and he sacrifices himself by grabbing...
Trying to incorporate a monkey in there, but it's just, I don't really see the monkey.
We don't hear
It's like I
anything
give it
from
a
him for
monkey
another
tail
6
type.
months when he's mysteriously
Trying to put
manifested
aspects
in
of,
the House of M
um,
series as part of an alternate reality created by Wanda. Hawkeye knows nothing about his death until the heroes receive a collective wake-up call and discover that they are all living in this alternative timeline. Hawkeye confronts Wanda and shoots her in the back with an arrow before he is uncreated again and killed. What makes Hawkeye's eventual resurrection special is the visual readers get in the last installment of House of M. As Captain America and the new Avengers are walking around the remains of their old Avengers
Parrots
mansion,
are
Matt
very,
discovers Clint's costume
very
along with
long
a
wing.
newspaper article announcing Hawkeye's death
I don't really notice it.
to the wall with an arrow. After that teaser, Marvel made readers wait another few months before bringing Hawkeye back for good. That moment comes in New Avengers Volume 1, number 26, when Hawkeye once again seeks out Wanda. The two share an intimate moment together, and Hawkeye is finally able to let go and move on with his restored life. Bad Resurrection number 4, Jean Grey. During the iconic run on Uncanny X-Men, Jean is assumed by the cosmic power of the Dark Phoenix Force. At one point, the Phoenix Force is so hungry for energy, she destroys an entire planet, killing billions. She eventually regains control of her body, but finds herself battling with the Phoenix again and commits suicide to save her teammates and the universe from the deadly cosmic force. Reportedly, writer Claremont never wanted to kill off Jean, but was forced to develop some kind of severe punishment for her after Marvel editor-in-chief Jim Shooter was outraged by the fact that the longtime heroine had fictitiously killed off an entire planet of people. The muddy circumstances around her death ultimately impacted her revival 6 years later in Fantastic Four 286. At that time, Marvel was looking to capitalize on the rampant success of the X-Books and had developed a new series, X-Factor, which would feature the original lineup of the Uncanny X-Men. Marvel editorial had to come up with a way to revive Jean that would satisfy Shooter. Reportedly, Kurt Busiek, before he became a renowned comic book writer himself, pitched to Marvel an idea of Jean being enclosed in a cocoon on the bottom of Jamaica Bay in New York. As for Jean's suicide, it was explained that it was really the Phoenix Force impersonating her during the storyline. These ideas were adapted. As convoluted as it sounded, Jean's return was made even worse by the fact that she just kind of appears in Fantastic Four and then in X-Factor. The gravitas of her Shakespearean-like demise was cheapened. Good Resurrection number 4, Norman Osborn. The death of Norman Osborn, aka Green Goblin, aka Spider-Man's deadliest villain, is considered a seminal moment in comic book history. Fresh off of killing Peter Parker's girlfriend Gwen Stacy and ending the Silver Age of comic books in the 1970s, the Goblin then inadvertently kills himself when he is impaled by his own glider. Norman stays dead for decades, though his legacy carried on through his son Harry, who becomes the second Green Goblin. Osborn also inspired other copycat villains, such as the Hobgoblin, but there was never any inkling that Norman would return until the final installments of the reviled Clone Saga arc in the mid-1990s.
So what do you think, guys, so far? Sorry, I've been sort of doodling here, but here's my monkey with a turtle and a parrot.
Showdown in Peter Parker's Spider-Man number 75. That's when we learned that Norman faked his own death and had the glider scar on his chest to prove it, and was the mastermind behind the often frustrating Clone Saga. He survived those wounds due to his enhanced strength from the Goblin Serum. Also, the issue where he confronts Spider-Man for the first time as the Green Goblin again is one of the best Spidey comics from the 90s, and Norman would go on to be the focal point of many other classic stories involving Spider-Man and the Avengers in the years that followed. Bad Resurrection number 3, Elektra. Arguably the greatest creation,
a combination of an animal.
Initial run on Daredevil, Elektra was Marvel Comics' original and most popular femme fatale.
We got a turtle in there, a monkey, and the face and the legs.
Elektra turns to the side of evil and is a hired assassin for Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of
The turtle, obviously, with the shell, but the wings are the parrot. The beak is the parrot, and sort of as it's standing in the tree, kind of trying to pose as a parrot as well.
But she remained dead. Elektra would eventually be revived for real during the bloated Fall from Grace storyline during the next.
So there's the parrot.
In the end, her
Sorry, guys.
resurrection was a
There's
bit
the parrot.
random and done only because she's a popular character,
And there's the
not for
parrot.
the sake of a good story. Good resurrection number 3, Colossus.
Let's take you off and give you another look.
The second generation of X-Men who debuted in the legendary giant-sized X-Men number 1, Peter Rasputin, aka Colossus, died a noble death in Uncanny X-Men 390 when he selflessly injected himself with the deadly
There you are, guys. There's the parrot I was trying to draw
allowing
from.
the cure to become airborne. Colossus stayed
And,
dead for more than 3 years before he was
there's the one
finally
I've
revived as a
drew.
part of the opening arc of the legendary Joss Whedon, John Cassidy run on
We got the
Astonishing
parrot
X-Men.
as well as the monkey. So you see what I've seen with the parrot's nose, or beak, sorry. And then we've got the monkey sort of head and ear and sort of the fur. I might get some fur on here on the legs as well. But there's the shell from the turtle. Again, this is all going to be coloured, so it may look better once it's coloured, sort of give it a different tone and sort of make it look. I'll have another look at the thing, but I want the other picture in the book here. Not for the parrot, but for the turtle and things like that. I might do a bigger version. Now I've kind of got the idea on what I want it to look like. I could do like a larger one here, sort of not crawling, walking. And monkeys don't walk either, do they? They swing. So I have to maybe put another one in, maybe swinging, hanging from his tail, because I did see a good monkey pose, which I wish I could find again.
Still,
Wasn't that one?
Threat of May dropping dead, she managed to survive for nearly 40 years until the extraordinarily
No, not that one there either.
producing Amazing Spider-Man number 400. In the issue, May, who had been in
Oh,
the
this
month,
book.
revives for one more day with Peter. During this day, she tells
Give
him
it
she
arms,
knew
I suppose,
Spider-Man
of some
the whole
sort.
time, and later peacefully
I don't know if I could
dies
fit an arm in there.
at her bedside. As a part of the final chapter storyline in the late 90s,
Let's see if I can get an arm in there. Oh, there's my bedroom. No one wants to see in there.
He then announces that he installed a chip in May's brain.
Oh, well, you may see in there soon, as I got to finish off a Muriel, thinking about that. Who knows? This year might be the year I actually finish it.
The story breaks nearly every
Put an arm in there.
Plus, it undid a true masterpiece by one of the greatest
Reaching out.
Spider-Man writers of all time. Good resurrection number 2, Bucky Barnes. For decades, Bucky Barnes, Captain America's sidekick and best buddy during World War II, was as dead as it gets in comics. His death in an aeroplane explosion that only Cap managed to survive by being frozen in ice would go on to haunt Captain America for the entirety of his time in the modern Marvel Universe. Through the eyes of Cap, various creative teams would go on to give us Bucky-centric flashback stories and hallucinations. But Bucky was always dead. And then the creative team of Ed Brubaker and Steve Epting went ahead and did it. Yup, they resurrected Bucky as part of the 2005-2006 Captain America arc, The Winter Soldier. To be fair, thanks to the MCU, you'll know about Bucky's story by now. But still, The Winter Soldier is such an iconic part of Cap's history that it's easy to forget it's only 13 years old. Bad Resurrection number 1, Heroes Reborn / Heroes Return. Desperate for any kind of financial spark.
Putting some fur in, it's just layers and lines, really, guys.
Marvel did the unthinkable
Again,
in
I'm
1996. It killed off many of its most
doodly,
popular
doodly, doodly. I don't talk so much when I doodly do.
During the crossover event on
See if I can get you a bit closer on this.
Marvel then outsourced the Avengers, Fantastic Four, Captain America, and Iron Man series to early 90s artists who had defected to Image Comics a few years earlier, Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld. A year later, Marvel ditched Lee and Liefeld and brought the production of the Fantastic Four, Avengers, Captain America, and Iron Man series back in-house. To explain away the past year of comics, the Heroes Return miniseries shows that Franklin Richards, the son of Fantastic Four member Reed Richards, created a pocket universe where all of the heroes who were assumed dead existed until they were brought back from limbo.
There you go. You can see what I'm doing now.
Universe. Good Resurrection number 1, Captain America. The original superhero resurrection story, Captain America's reintroduction to the Marvel Universe in 1963, is considered a seminal moment in comic book history. Cap was created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby during World War II when Marvel...
So yeah, I was trying to do, say, maybe a monkey sitting on a tree, and then it went into the... had to have a beak from a parrot. That arm's doing quite well for itself, so I'm going to put some fur on its legs as well. Maybe only to a certain point. maybe give the rest of it a parrot's leg.
Most of the other heroes,
Find that parrot again. Oh, gotta find the parrot. Can't remember where there it is. The parrot's claws are kind of head away from the wings, so that's kind of annoying.
He would be killed off again.
I don't want to give it a chicken feet.
During Civil War, but would be revived again in time for his
Trying to keep it to the animal's shape, but actually looks sort of similar to the animal, but not the animal itself. Because obviously it's a mutant. Now I can see that line there. I know that's there. So
what's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice.
We're now listening to Comics Explained, guys. They are awesome, and check them out if you want any kind of comic explanation or any kind of comic read for you if you like to listen to them or watch them in sleep.
And I've been trying to find a way to see if we can make it work. So what we're going to do,
or they're a good thing to sort of put on in the background. So if you're doing the dishes, that's what I do. Put them on in the background and listen to them. Or just generally, if you want to sit down and be entertained.
So normally we would cover we should be covering X-Men and Green Lantern, but I've been getting a house remodeled and all kinds of good stuff, and that went on the back burner, and I'm going to do this instead. So I'm kind of curious to see how people will respond to this. Now, Fear itself is an interesting story. Here's a funny thing about this. So when Joe Quesada took over Marvel Comics in the early 2000s as editor-in-chief, basically from 2000 going forward, it was designed to rework everything. Right? And then we went into Siege, and then we had Dark Reign, Siege, the Heroic Age, and then we go into Fear itself. And the Heroic Age was designed to basically say, here's heroes being heroes. Initially, it was like that. All these different characters and teams got one-shots, and then you had the actual Heroic Age miniseries and so on and so forth. But it didn't last all that long, because in reality, people had kind of liked the darker tone of storytelling. Stories like Civil War, Secret Invasion, things like that. People somewhat enjoyed that. The other half of this was that by the time 2011 and 2012 came around, Marvel was planning out Secret Wars. And so the result was that Jonathan Hickman's Avengers, the New Avengers, picked up shortly after this, and then just started going forward with the collapse of the multiverse. So there wasn't really a whole lot of time to sort of restore heroes back to what they're supposed to be, quote unquote. Instead, it was just kind of picking up, sticking with what worked, and then eventually going into Secret Wars, which led into all different Marvel. Now, initially what this does is this picks up with the character of Sin. Now, Cynthia Smith is the daughter of Red Skull, and her character originally appeared back in Captain America Comics in issue number 290. We're really 289 going into 290. But she was basically this idea that Red Skull wanted an heir for himself. And so with this in mind, what ended up happening here is
just trying to think how
now, the original intention of Red Skull was to kill it because she wasn't a
claw would go around
spared, and he started raising her to become his new protege. Now, this comes after Ed Brubaker's Captain America run. And the reason why I say that, the reason why it matters is because
I'm wondering how a claw would go around a tree branch. So sort of go up here.
Red Skull having a cosmic cube, different things like that, but ultimately resulted in quote unquote Red Skull dying. And so
he doesn't need monkey feet. It would be cool to give him claw feet.
Go forward as a potential replacement for the Red Skull, which of course, as we know, it didn't work. That's one of the things. You read comics long enough, one of the things you learn is that nothing ever stays changed forever. And so in this instance, what she's done is she's allied herself with Baron Zemo. Now, what they've done is they've discovered the Book of the Skull. And the Book of the Skull basically housed various secrets that Red Skull kept hidden and various sources of power that he was never able to use for one reason or another. Now, this ultimately leads into them basically accessing the bunker of Red Skull. And then once they get in, Cynthia Schmidt begins to basically sort of reveal this tale. And what we end up finding out is that in the 1940s,
birds generally only have 3 toes.
The Red Skull had essentially traveled to a section of Atlanta, really in Germany, but had brought Atlantean mystics to him, and in turn basically forced them to start using their various forms of magics in order to access a sort of super weapon out there that would serve the purpose of allowing the Germans to basically win World War II. Now, the other half of this is the invaders themselves, because with this going on, essentially the artifact that's been summoned, more or less, by Red Skull has flown across the sky and landed somewhere else, meaning they have to go chase it down. Now, this ultimately leads to them basically accessing where the Red Skull was operating out of, just because of the fact that word had reached their ears that strange things were going on. And
I think that's going to have to do for the feet.
From, basically following the trail of the Germans and liberating all the camps that they could come across. And so when Namor steps in here and ends up finding out that all the members of these various Atlanteans have essentially all been killed, it's a big to-do. Because one of the things to remember is that when it comes to Namor, he is fiercely protective of his people. As prince, as basically the ruler of Atlantis, he'll go to the ends of the earth. Now, from here, picking up with Red Skull, as well as the rest of these German forces, once they arrive here, you've also got the invaders hot on their trail. Because by this point, the various folks in Germany have basically said, hey, look, here's what was going on with the Red Skull and various magics and so on and so forth. But this item had basically crash landed in Antarctica, and the initial indication is that it's a hammer, because Red Skull cannot pick it up. He can't lift it. Now, this is not the hammer of Thor. This is a totally secret hammer that no one's ever known about before. And so the result here is that Red Skull's response is to basically say, no one can know about this outside of us. Basically, if you tell anybody, I'll kill you. Not only that, like, build a fortress, do whatever you have to do, but your job is to study this thing and learn how to use its power. Now, the big takeaway from this is that, one, this is indeed a hammer. Two, Red Skull basically lies to Von Strucker and everybody else when he says, this is explicitly for the Fuhrer. None of you guys are supposed to know about this thing. This is not for your eyes to see, when in reality, it was never moved, it was never lifted, because it couldn't be lifted by Red Skull or anybody else. And so when Cynthia finishes telling this story to Baron Zemo, what she ends up doing is basically saying, like, this is, what I have here is a map, a location of where this hammer is. Because, access to this tomb, again, only really reveals information. It doesn't actually reveal any particularly powerful artifacts. And so Cynthia essentially betrays Helmut Zemo and takes off to find the hammer for herself. And so at this point, we jump forward to the actual Fear itself story. So again, we're going to do this very similar to Civil War, in the sense that you've got the tie-ins and you've got like the main event itself. Now, this is where Fear itself really begins to give us what it was that Joe Quesada and company were shooting for, in the sense that, like Civil War, it was designed to be a reflection of the modern day. Now, this is in 2010, 2011. And so we're talking about right before the point when, like, housing prices after the mortgage crisis had reached bare bottom, when it basically like dropped off to the lowest point and then began the point of recovery. And so what
I'm trying to do a larger version of it now.
Angry, right? I mean, that's the nature.
Thinking the head's going to be too out. It's going to be in the way, but see, if I was doing this on paper in digital form, I could go over that and then keep that picture there and not have to worry about it. But we're not. Maybe I could do something like. But yeah, I'm going to be doing a bigger version of it there now. Let's get rid of that one. Here's my other rubber. Where's my Fantastico rubber?
Something's going on here. This also leads to the
no.
various armed forces
gassing
protesters, because as we know, civil disobedience is still disobedience. And so, of course, they're basically
their at
the very least, return to a state of normalcy. Now, picking back up with Sin and traveling to Antarctica, this massive citadel of sorts has basically been constructed. Not only that, what she says is that all the scientists of World War II are currently occupied inside this place. That they've been stuck there the entire time, and they have no idea of what's been going on outside in the real world. They don't know the war is ended. They don't know that they don't know any of that stuff. As far as they're aware, they're still operating on orders from the Red Skull. And what they've been doing is studying this hammer the entire time. But in the end, it's all to no avail. They haven't figured out a way to lift it. They haven't figured out a way to tap into its power. It's just a thing that's there, and they're basically doing the same thing day in and day out. And so what ends up happening here is that Sin basically approaches the hammer, picks it up, and immediately switches over. She basically starts calling herself Sky. Now, the reason why is because that's the actual inscription on the hammer itself. It's basically that hammer's name. And so where she dons this hammer, she begins going forward saying, we're going to seek out its, basically its father, its owner, and then go from there. Now, at this point, this is when we start to switch over into Iron Man basically rebuilding Asgard. And it's actually a pretty cool thing, because remember, this comes after the events of Siege, which come after the events of Dark Reign. So Norman Osborn's already been deposed, right? He's already been toppled, been defeated, and Dark Reign is over. He's no longer in control of S.H.I.E.L.D. But for the most part, the purpose of Dark Reign and even the events of Siege was to basically disband and to remove the entirety of the Superhuman Registration Act. That was basically a holdover from the events of Civil War. Essentially, it was the Marvel Comics equivalent of somebody just sort of letting their voice trail off. It would just kind of be something that was never really referenced anymore, kind of forgotten, and fans would eventually ask the question, what happened to the Registration Act? And Marvel wouldn't want to have to release a one-shot or go through a whole bunch of hoops in order to provide an answer to that question. And so in this instance, what ends up happening here is with the Registration Act gone, Captain America Steve Rogers is long since back. He's been reborn after the events of his death. And this basically leads to Iron Man shipping out and essentially saying, while this does seem kind of weird, at the end of the day, it is people...
Oh, it's everywhere now, guys. But I don't care. If it gets flicked onto the floor, that's why I hooper.
Psychic mutant out there that's going crazy and using their powers? Is it some villain? Did Mysterio make it all happen? And there's no answer to that. It's not the actions of any one person that push these people to the extreme. It's just that they're just really that pissed off. And so the response of Iron Man basically looking at Captain America is saying, after World War II was over, what did you guys do? You guys built things. You had the economic explosion of the United States in the 1950s. And so his response is to say, we need to do the same thing. You have people right now who basically feel like they were ripped off, left hanging. What they need is to be put to work. What they need is to be able to do something with the auspices that they can make the world better. And so the result is that Iron Man says, we're going to get them to work. Asgard's been destroyed. It was destroyed by the Sentry during Siege. So let's build a new one. I told them I would. So let's just start, let's get to work on building a new Asgard. And that's what everybody starts to do. Now, this is kind of a background thing. Instead, it's basically Iron Man getting out there and telling the world, here's what we're going to do. We're going to rebuild the entirety of Asgard. Now, the reason why this matters is that for those of you guys who are reading Thor comics right now, what you'll notice is that there's two Asgards. There's basically old Asgard, which also exists in the dimension of Asgard. Then there's Asgardia, which is hovering out there around Saturn somewhere. The one that's around Saturn, that's the one that Iron Man built. And so again, with Scotty traveling down to where this particular being is located at, she basically starts facing off against all these various monsters and demons that have been placed there by Odin as kind of a measure of protection. Now, when it comes to Asgardian magic, it gets a little iffy. It's really a plot device more than anything.
Turtle.
Captain America might be able to overcome Asgardian magic in one story, and then he's just hopelessly powerless against it in another story. In this instance, these kind of beasts and monsters being placed here, we would have to believe are most likely beings that none of the superheroes would be able to successfully defeat on their own. And so that's why Scatty's here, is because she's going through and literally tearing them limb from limb, using this hammer, ripping them apart, only to find out there's basically a kind of sarcophagus with a seal of sorts on it. And when she penetrates this seal and enters into the inside, into this sort of, tomb, more or less, she's met by the arrival of a guy who refers to himself as the Allfather, saying that he's the rightful ruler of Asgard. So it's a pretty cool thing, because when that happens, Odin basically says, this is it. This is the prophecy that I've been trying to avoid for all this time. This serpent has finally made his return. And so it's interesting here, because when Thor comes along and basically starts conversing with his father, the two of them start getting really, really aggressive, because Thor's idea is, look, we should be standing next to the earthly superheroes who are looking to try to find a way to rebuild Asgard. For Odin, it's really more pride than anything else. And that's always been the thing about his character. The way that Odin's been written in Marvel Comics has always been that he's exceedingly prideful, in the sense that he's like, Asgardian business is Asgardian business, and we do not air our dirty laundry. But for Thor, he's walking the middle of the road. He's an Avenger on one side and an Asgardian on the other. And when the question was asked earlier, which one would he choose, Asgardians or man, he chooses man. And so the result here is that he's kind of taken a stance against Odin. Now, where Thor pops up with Mjolnir and is just kind of like, look, if that's how you want to be, then we can take this to the mattresses and I can beat the hell out of you with the hammer. It's basically Odin responding by saying, hammer drop. Do not allow Thor to lift you. Now, it's small things like this that really go towards the idea of Thor becoming unworthy. When Thor first lost the ability to wield his hammer, not only could Thor not lift it, Odin couldn't lift it. The hammer had basically had a will of its own. It was doing its own thing. Now, of course, we know the answer to that now, but at the time we didn't. And that was the nature of the hammer in response to how the Asgardian mythos functioned. That while it was the hammer that Thor wielded, it was basically passed on to him by Odin. And the enchantment that Odin placed on it was that only a worthy person could wield it. And so the response that Odin makes is that he gives and he takes away. And so basically it's one of these things, by the grace of me goes your ability to wield that hammer. And this is a significant moment, because it shows just how much more powerful Odin is than Thor. Regardless, what ends up happening is Odin basically says, we're departing this place. We don't need humanity's aid. We're leaving this place and we're going back to Asgard. And so again, it's interesting, because switching back over to Scatty and with this guy, basically the serpent, her response is, if what you're looking to do is topple the Asgardians and essentially conquer the world, is this something that can be done by us? And the response he gives is, it will not just be us. It's going to be those who I deem to be worthy. And so what he does is he basically summons a handful of hammers, which are going to land in different places on Earth, and various people are going to pick them up. And they're going to become the worthy, basically the followers of the serpent, and in turn, be imbued with all new levels of powers, each one representing a different facet of what the serpent stands for. And so while all this is going on, essentially Earth is under siege by hidden Asgardian powers that no one really seemed to be aware of before outside of Odin. And in the moment when they could use the help of the Asgardians, they leave. Odin instructs all of them to walk away. And so they're all basically being taken back to Asgard. Thor himself is being forced back there, and Earth is being left to the defense of the superheroes who were there. And that's really about it. So we are continuing on with Fear itself. And Fear, it is a really cool story. It is a pretty badass story. At this point, we pick up with Journey into Mystery. Now, those of you guys who don't know, Journey into Mystery, originally it was like a sci-fi story. There was a series of science fiction, mystery comics, whatever. And then Thor appeared. And then Thor was so popular that eventually Journey into Mystery became the Thor line of comics. For the most part, when Journey into Mystery was brought back, it basically revolved around Loki. And the reason for that, again, came out of Siege. And this is part of the things that we've talked about in the past, where we've said that Marvel does soft reboots, which is to say they shuffle up a character, they change status quo, but they don't do hard line reboots, despite the fact they need to. In this instance, what ended up happening is that during the events of Siege on Asgard, in Thor issue number 617, which was actually part of the aftermath of Siege, we ended up discovering that what Loki had done is he had gone to Hela, who was basically the ruler of the Asgardian afterlife, and it essentially bartered things, so that he could basically return to life when his physical form died. And so what ended up happening after this was that in Thor 617, Loki came back, but he was a little kid, and he had no knowledge of anything he had done when he was an adult. He was basically a blank slate. So again, it was pretty smart, and it was a pretty genius idea in terms of trying to rework his character. Kid Loki is actually pretty cool. Namely, Loki has discovered the internet, and it is interesting. He's basically taking pictures of all these crazy things happening around Asgard, and people are just that's not you had to have used the lens filter because obviously he's using Instagram. But anyway, one of the things to notice here is that Loki's basically being ridiculed by one of the other Asgardians, and this was par for the course. People remember him as the trickster, the bad guy, the one that's essentially brought nothing but ruin and pain upon Asgard itself. But for Thor, one thing to remember is Loki is his brother. And Thor really sees this version of Kid Loki for what he is. He's not really blinded by the things Loki's done in the past. And so the result is that he kind of chases a few of these bullies off and basically says, hey, look, this is kind of how these things go. Eventually, it'll pass. And so it's kind of interesting here because Loki's saying stuff like when he discovered the internet, he's saying stuff like, I told people I was an Asgardian and they started calling me a troll. Nobody on the internet believes me. And to me, it's such an awesome exchange, right? Because Thor's kind of well, Loki is, I am aware of the internet and we avoid it avidly because people on the internet are weird. I mean, not really, but it's just kind of a funny thing. I like the idea of Kid Loki discovering the internet. But the fact remains here that what Loki ends up doing is stumbling upon this magpie, this bird. And as soon as he approaches it, the thing explodes and reveals a key. And this is why Journey into Mystery
it's kind of trying to make him slow, but there's two other fast animals in there. A parrot's kind of smart. And monkey's nearly human, but a turtle's hey guys, I'm just gonna have some lettuce and it's gonna have good time with my lettuce. I'm just gonna sleep now cause I'm a turtle, so I can have little small furry arms, and he's gonna be with his wings going, oh, I'm just laying down. Why might I float over here now? But the monkey's like, oh, wake up. Oh, look at this. Oh, I wanna know. What are you doing? Hey, what's this? What you got? Oh, tell me what you got. Show me. So, I wanna know. Monkey, blah, blah.
And then he starts basically following these sage bits. He reads this little passage that says that Loki went into the void, and no one knows why. And that's when he falls down into this darker place and discovers the older version of himself. This is classic Journey into Mystery Thor storytelling. So meeting with his older self, this older version of Loki basically says, look, I am here to impart wisdom on you, and I'm the reason why you exist. Basically, I bartered with Hela, everything that we said at the beginning of the video, and the idea was that I would be reborn in a new physical form. Now, this is important because this is not really the spirit of older Loki. It's more of a memory echo. But this is kind of an important thing because over the course of the Journey into Mystery line, which we may or may not cover, there will be points when Kid Loki will meet with his older self. And there's actually points in the modern Thor storytelling where Kid Loki will not only meet with his older self, he'll actually meet with the female version of himself. And then the modern day Loki will meet with Kid Loki and the female version and his original self. So it's really one of these things where because of the steps that Loki's taken to ensure his own existence, very akin to Voldemort and the Horcruxes. What this means is that there are sort of echoes of himself that exist out there in the Marvel landscape, which can be encountered by any one of his versions at any particular point in time, assuming that echo has already been created. But it's basically him saying, look, I have sage advice to give you, I have bits of knowledge to give you, you have to listen to this because there is a crisis coming to Earth and to Asgard. Of course, we know that older Loki is speaking of the serpent. And these are important things to remember because by and large, Loki was always considered to be the trickster and the guy who created mischief, and that's true. But because of his experiences in traveling around the various cosmos, because of his experience in seeing and doing all these things, what this means is that Loki has a vast amount of knowledge, some of which is based on things he's not supposed to know. And so because of all this, he's a very, very huge resource if you can find a way to tap into that without incurring his wrath or letting him trick you or something along those lines. And that's what happens with Kid Loki. And it's kind of a cool thing because this is really Marvel saying like Loki is Loki is Loki is Loki. It'll always end up being the same. All of this has happened before, and all of it'll happen again, to quote Battlestar Galactica. That all roads lead to Rome. That no matter how many times Loki is born, no matter how many times he returns to his former self, he will always end up becoming the Loki that we always know, because that's what his character is. That's what he's about. And so what this story does is it basically segues into the tail bit of Fear Itself that we covered in the last video, where Odin essentially like leads the Asgardians out of Earth and takes them directly back to Asgard, to the Asgardian dimension.
What's going on?
Go through and start recreating everything. Now, at this point, we kind of switch over to the aftermath, right? Like to when they're actually in.
What's going on?
And remember, like this place is just in shambles. I mean, it's been this way ever since Ragnarok. It's been just torn to pieces. Now, again, it's entirely within the power of Odin. And that's really what he says. But notice this, not everyone agrees with what Odin does. And that's one of the misconceptions a lot of people, I think, have when it comes to the Thor mythos, is a lot of people look at the character of Odin and they say, well, he's the All-Father, he's the leader. Of course they all follow him. Loki and Thor are the only ones that really kind of do what they want. Not true. Just because Odin is the All-Father and the leader does not mean everyone agrees with what he does. The difference here is that Odin has enough power to obliterate anybody, and he pretty much will. And so because of this, Thor basically speaks up. When a couple people start talking about how it feels like a retreat, Thor says, that's because it is. Because the power that's there on Earth, whatever this serpent is enough that it scares Odin. And Odin is essentially running away. And so where Thor questions his father, where he calls him in and says, look, you're essentially a coward, is what you are. Like, you're a weakling. Our job is to protect all 9 of the realms. You are hiding in your home, waiting for the threat to come to you. You are every ounce the coward that you're acting as. Then Odin immediately has him locked up, immediately has Thor like taken away and put in chains. And so at this point, this is when we start getting into the idea of the worthy. Those individuals out there who are given these secret Asgardian hammers. And the first one up is Juggernaut. So, but what ends up happening is, of course, you have Juggernaut going through his workout time. 7 minutes is really all he gets. And then like while all this is going on, a hammer crash lands into the prison. And of course, this is one of the things that you end up finding out. Those individuals who are worthy, the hammer will speak to them. They'll just hear words, voices, things like that emanating from the hammer itself. And so when Juggernaut picks it up, he basically ends up becoming cursed. Now again, this idea of Juggernaut gaining another power source in addition to what he has will be a major plot point when it comes to the story. This is something that I want you to keep in the back of your head as we go further through the Fear Itself event. But Juggernaut with this power is a myth. I mean, he just starts smashing everything in his path. And so what ends up happening is we switch over directly to Steve Rogers, to Captain America, to Maria Hill, to Sharon Carter. And it's basically like the new Avengers roster combined with what passes for what's left of the Thunderbolts. And it's essentially this idea that like all this pandemonium and chaos is happening around the world, that these objects are crash landing. Now, in response to them landing, various places around the world, major metropolitan areas, are turning into absolute madhouses. Things are completely and totally going awry. And so Reed Richards chimes in as part of the Future Foundation. Remember, this comes after Hickman's Fantastic Four, so the Future Foundation's already been formed by that point. But Reed chimes in as a Future Foundation and says, look, a hammer or something like that has crash landed in New York. We're studying it at the moment, but it looks like it's of Asgardian nature. So this thing looks pretty intense. And then we switch over to the one thing everybody wants to see, the Incredible Hulk. This is one of the coolest things. This is what I love about you guys. Everybody loves the Incredible Hulk. What people love even more is when the Incredible Hulk gets something that modifies his power. What they love more than that is when he gets somebody else's power source. Specifically when he gets an Asgardian hammer. People love that kind of stuff. But this basically takes place after the events of Greg Pak's run. And really kind of the finality of that event, from Heart of the Monster Hulk. And we saw from that story that it picked up where it really ended with like the Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner, and Betty Ross, Red She-Hulk, just kind of jumping out and doing what they do in the heat of passion. And so they're just kind of there doing their thing. But while all this is going on, a hammer basically lands. And the Incredible Hulk sort of listens to it, hears it talking, and then against Betty Ross' protest, goes to pick it up. And when he does, he turns into like the most badass looking character. Now, it is not an accident for why he looks this way. While this is a totally new design for him, it does have some hints and homages to the time when he basically became a horseman for Apocalypse. When he became War, I think it was. But again, I mean, he's Null, and he's basically called the Breaker of Worlds, because what the hell else would you call him? Everybody loves World Breaker Hulk. But again, it's kind of cool, because from here, we basically pick up with a character named Titania. Now, the character of Titania made her debut back in Secret Wars, issue number 3, the original Secret Wars. from 1984. The original Secret Wars was a highly publicized story. So because of that, the idea was that if so many people are going to be reading the story, then not only was the basis of it to bring like all the heroes and villains together and have them face off against each other in an effort to sell toys, but why not add some new characters in there? And so what we got a couple different people there. We got Jennifer Carpenter, who was the original Spider-Woman, but then we also got Titania, Mary McFerrin. Now, Mary McFerrin was not really interesting up until that point. In fact, her origin story was pretty mundane. She was raised in the suburbs of Denver. She was shy, she was timid, and never really had anything going for her. The idea was that during the events of Secret Wars, before Doctor Doom had stolen the power of Galactus and then eventually the power of the Beyonder, what he had done was he had basically created kind of like a supervillain team trying to recruit people to his side. And so what ended up happening here is that Doom discovered Mary and another character, and I can't remember her name, like Vanessa, I think it was, and then in turn basically endowed them with powers. Now, Mary was endowed with basically super strength, durability, different things like that, and she was also like grown in size, so she became a lot more voluptuous, and she became a lot stronger, a lot more muscular than her previous version had been. Now, after the events of Secret Wars, she kind of had an on-again, off-again relationship with Crusher Creel, which basically became more solidified by the mid-1990s. And so by that point going forward, they were just kind of together. But from there, like what ends up happening, she's one of the people who basically seizes a hammer for herself. It crashes, she grabs it, picks it up, and then she tells Absorbing Man, you have a hammer waiting on you. And this is kind of a big deal because Crusher Creel is someone who can basically absorb various metals and turn himself into those metals, absorb their properties. And so in turn, giving him a hammer, I would argue he could potentially be one of the most powerful. Now, we'll find out as time goes on, but it's somewhat of a cool thing because in this moment, with all the worthy basically being selected, or a huge number of them being selected, essentially the Serpent starts reaching out to all of them and saying, your job now is to basically fill the world with chaos.
Monkey.
As much chaos, destruction, and fear as you possibly can. And when that's done, we'll take the next step. And that's exactly what they do. They start ripping through and tearing things up. Now, this fear spreads more fear. I mean, the Incredible Hulk running through, ripping things to pieces, Red She-Hulk doing what she can. It's instilling as much fear as possible because now you have all these people with these insane levels of strength and power who are just running rampant across the face of the earth. And where the Avengers try to respond, the problem with this is that their communications network is essentially taken down when the White House and the Capitol are totally obliterated. And so where Captain America kind of sends out the SOS and says Avengers assemble, there's no one there to respond. No one answers him. And so essentially everyone's kind of scattered to the four winds. It's pandemonium. It's a worst case situation. It's pretty messed up and it's pretty rough, but it's amazing. Okay, so we are continuing on with Fear itself. And here was the deal with Fear itself. I got to talk about this for a second because there's a couple things that I feel like we need to explain.
Okay, I think I'm going to have to step back.
Look at me back. Fear itself was one
for a turtle show, so I can get some nice detail on there because it's looking fair. Not good, but it's looking fair. It's looking fairly shit. I like the top one. It's just like concept. The ideas of getting all into one animal is hard.
There were a lot of things that had happened. A lot of status quo changes. The Avengers were disbanded. They were replaced by the new Avengers. 98% of the mutant population lost their powers. There were a lot of things that went on in Marvel at the time. One of the most notable things was the death of Captain America. And we'll talk more about that here in a second. But what this story was designed to do in a lot of ways was to take a lot of those threads that had kind of been left hanging, those plot threads that just sort of been dangling all this time, and essentially wrap them up, to basically tie up loose ends. Now, not all of them were tied up. And in fact, the ones that weren't tied up were designed or were left that way for the purpose of telling future stories later on down the line. For example, the formation of Stark Resilient, which would come later on, different things like that. But the idea here is that we initially pick up with Captain America facing off against, the forces of sin and really what kind of passes for Hydra, but not really. But again, this is not like Steve Rogers' Captain America. This is Bucky Barnes' Captain America. Now, the reason why I feel like that needs to be explained is I don't think I explained that in the first or second video. And two, this event actually wraps that up. So when Captain America died after the events of Civil War, and following that, Iron Man, I'm pretty sure it's Iron Man, takes Captain America's uniform and gives it to Bucky Barnes. And so Bucky Barnes becomes the new Captain America. And his arrival was met with it was a mixed reaction. Some of the old guard who really, really, really wanted Steve Rogers to stay. And there were some who were the old guard that wanted Steve Rogers to go. And then, of course, there were new fans who wanted to see Steve Rogers stay, and there were old fans who were, I guess, new fans who wanted to see him go. It was really kind of a mixed bag of people who wanted to see different things. But in any event, Steve Rogers had come back about a year before this story took place. He came back 2009, 2010, somewhere along those lines. And it was, of course, the Captain America Reborn storyline where you found out he was time displaced. They basically pulled a Batman from Final Crisis. But then once he made his return, there was a one-shot follow-up. And it was basically the question of who's going to wear the shield? Who's going to have Captain America's shield? Is it going to be Bucky or is it going to be Steve Rogers? And what this did is it allowed Marvel to spin Steve Rogers out into a whole other series called Secret Avengers. And Secret Avengers basically served the purpose of having like a Black Ops team for the Avengers group. But that's the team that Steve Rogers largely led, and that was this whole thing. What this does is it basically removes Bucky Barnes from the mantle and it brings Steve Rogers back. But at the moment right now, with this initial charge going into the U.S. Capitol, it really is Bucky Barnes leading the team. Now, switching over to Asgard, this was an interesting situation because this again deals with Kid Loki. And that's one of the things that goes on here. When it comes to the event of Fear itself, it was a little bit different from a lot of the other crossover events that you saw, in the sense that Journey into Mystery was designed to provide the back end for why it was Loki was doing what he was doing in the main story itself. Whereas in a lot of the events that go on, sometimes, especially like when it came to like Secret Empire, for example, the tie-ins are wholly separated from the main story itself. And so you'll have like the beginning of the event, of like Secret Empire, for example, and then it'll split off into tie-ins. And the tie-ins will show what characters are doing, and then they'll wrap back into the main event at the end. And so unless you've been reading the tie-ins, you have no idea how that character got to where they were. With this, it's totally different. Fear itself was designed to be kind of like a new age of storytelling when it comes to crossover events. It was basically this idea of like the main story gives you all you need, and you don't really need anything else. But you go read Civil War, and it's woefully incomplete if you don't read if you don't read the tie. Nothing really seems to make sense, and so it's one of those interesting scenarios. But nonetheless, Kid Loki showing up here is basically for the purposes of breaking Thor out of prison. What Kid Loki's been doing so far has basically been trying to sow revolution within the Asgardian landscape. The problem with this is that under most normal circumstances, people may have been inclined to side with him if it wasn't him, if it wasn't Loki. If it was Thor, people would follow him. It would basically be Thor leading a revolt against Odin, which isn't really something Thor would do, but with Kid Loki, he definitely would. The problem with this is that, again, Kid Loki's got the reputation of Loki. And so everybody would look at what he's saying and essentially coming along and being like, look, Odin's kind of lost his mind. We've got to find a way to stand up to him. We have to go back to Earth and we have to protect it. They would look at it as some kind of ruse. And so nobody really trusted Loki. And so at this moment, it's just kind of coming along and saying, okay, look, we've got to free Thor. Like, we got to get Thor out of here and get Thor back to Earth. And so in the interim, what this does is it picks up with really this kind of calamity across the board, in the sense that Absorbing Man basically has the powers of Thor. The Incredible Hulk now has the powers of Thor. I mean, it's all these crazy situations. And in response to the Incredible Hulk, what this ends up doing is bringing in like Carol Danvers, Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, which I don't even know why she's there. Here's a funny thing. So Jessica Drew has the ability to emit pheromones that will not really have the exact same effect as Purple Man. She can't really dominate the wills of others, but she can make them fall in love with her. Now, she tried it on Wolverine. In fact, myself and Sal at Comic Pop were having this cool conversation. I called him up, but we ended up he ended up talking about Jessica Drew, about Spider-Woman. And he's like, well, Spider-Woman tried her pheromones on Wolverine, and all it did was make him dizzy. So people with healing factors can combat it, but they're not like totally immune to it. But the Incredible Hulk would have to be the same way. But keep in mind, this Thor Hulk, for lack of a better word, is basically like mindless, savage Hulk, but bent for a particular purpose. But all these people who are wielding these hammers are all driven by fear. That's the important thing to bear in mind here. And the reason why is that when we switch over to the Fantastic Four, with the hammer having landed on Yancey Street in New York, the Fantastic Four were one of the first people to respond and to invest.
I do not like that
while
face.
All this is going on, the world is going to pot. Like, everybody else is dealing with a zillion different things.
What do you think, guys?
Chime into the Avengers.
I'm trying to think what else it could sort of be, but it's just not turning out the way I want it to. I hate that shell as well.
He starts hearing voices emanating from it. And when he goes to pick it up, of course, he's transformed into a mindless beast itself and just starts ripping everything to pieces. So again, every single person that gets one of these hammers is driven by fear and serves the purpose of sowing chaos. That's basically what this is. And the reason why is because the serpent feeds on fear. So long as those around him are feeling fear, he'll continue to grow stronger and basically gain more and more power. Now, for Thor himself, where he's freed by Loki and basically meets with Sif and the Warriors 3, the idea of basically standing against Odin, of leaving Odin's eye, traveling to Midgard, it amounts to heresy. This is a very dangerous game they're playing, because while Odin wouldn't necessarily kill them, Odin would certainly, he could banish them from Asgard, he could make them mortal, send them away. The Odin force is capable of doing all manner of different things. Again, it's a very dangerous game that they're playing here, and this game is discovered when Odin shows up. Now, this is kind of a funny thing here. This is really sort of feeding on the old nature of the Thor comics, the historical, publication history of Thor comics, as opposed to what we would expect. With Odin having previously locked up Thor and Loki breaking him out, and then coming into the situation where Thor's basically been freed and he's talking of revolt against Odin, it's not really like Thor's talking of revolt in the sense of leading the armies of Asgard against Odin himself. It's basically Odin walking in to his son and his friends, talking about abandoning Odin's view and traveling back to Midgard. And at this point, it's one of those things where it's like a father and a son. Sons always get a lot more leeway with fathers. It's just the way it is because it's their offspring. Parents are a lot more lenient with kids. And so instead of like casting Thor to prison, instead of making him mortal or something like that, he says, fine, then you'll have your quest. If what you want to do is go to Earth and fight among the people who are there, then do that. Now, a lot of this stems from the fact that Odin knows how stubborn Thor is. If Thor says, this is what I want to do, I want to go to Earth and I want to fight alongside the Earthlings because I feel more kin to them than I do to you, then Odin's going to be like, fine, because there's no talking Thor out of it. And so ultimately, Odin casts him out, sends him back to Earth, gives him his hammer, and says, here, you'll need this, but you've got a time frame. Once the serpent's power rises, like once he gets to the point where he's all powerful, where he sees his control of Earth, then one of two things is going to happen. Either I'm going to bring you back or I'm going to let you die. But regardless of what fate it is, you've brought it on yourself. And so again, it's kind of a cool thing because switching back to Captain America in the Capitol, with him, Falcon, Black Widow, facing off against Sin with all this new power, it's interesting because one of the things to bear in mind is that when it comes to Marvel, when it comes to stories like this, oftentimes they kind of seem to stretch the limits of credulity and they don't really seem to make sense. And the reason why is because you're dealing with someone with a formidable amount of power, both in strength, speed, durability, as well as the power she wields by virtue of her hammer, and would easily be able to crush Black Widow, Falcon, and Captain America. And so the question you would probably ask is, why are these the ones fighting? Well, in reality, the Avengers were never really consisted of the most powerful beings in Marvel comics. That was really reserved more for the X-Men. The Avengers are mostly just like the bravest people. They'll run headlong into their own deaths, but they'll run headlong. No, aside from the Incredible Hulk, Thor, the Avengers usually consist of mid-range to some of the weakest characters in the Marvel Universe. I mean, it's Captain America. What the hell can Captain America do? He can punch really hard and run fast and throw a shield. He's not ultra strong. He can't, control the elements. I mean, he can't do any of that cool stuff. The X-Men can, which some people will say the X-Men are kind of broken, which they are. Sidetrack. Think about that for a second. All right, so among the mutant population, you've got Franklin Richards, kind of, depending on who's writing the story. Sometimes he's a result of the Cosmic Control Rod, which is basically Galactus' power, the power cosmic from the negative zone, or he's a mutant. All right, you've got Storm, who's pretty much Omega level. Why the hell haven't they confirmed it? You've got Magneto, you've got Emma Frost, you've got Matthew Malloy. I mean, you have like all these super powerful Omega level characters who are just broken as hell. Like, dude, the X-Men are so broken. Somebody make an argument in the comment section. Somebody create an argument and tell me why the X-Men are not OP and broken. If you can make a convincing argument, I will give you a Rob 4 ring. So moving on from our little rant, our little diatribe. Of course, Sin takes it to Captain America. And that's the important thing to remember. Captain America is kind of like the leader of the group, right? Like, he's like the moral support. If you take him down, then most everybody else will lose their moral backbone. She ends up ripping off the arm of Bucky Barnes, plunges a staff right through his chest, and it essentially seems to kill him. And that's really the end of him. Like, that's the end of Bucky Barnes. At this point, he's just kind of like, look, you have to tell everyone the serpent is literally the person behind this, because at the moment, they haven't known. The Avengers haven't really known who's behind this. All they've known is that these artifacts, which they learned were hammers, had crash landed on Earth. Different people had picked them up. They gained insane levels of power, and they've just been attacking cities. By having contact with the hammer itself, he's learned the hammer's secrets. And the hammer's secrets are that it's basically the serpent who's behind all this, who's waging a war against Earth, and eventually seeks to set his sights on Asgard and retake the throne. Okay, so continuing on with Fear itself, at this point, we pick up with, well, basically with the arrival of Thor, with Thor showing back up. Now, here's a funny thing. Thor showing up here after being kind of banished, but not really, from Asgard. Once he shows up here, he immediately arrives in Broxton, Oklahoma. Now, again, for those of you guys who are not really familiar with Thor comics, Broxton is basically where he rebuilt Asgard. The problem with this was that the War of Dark Reign essentially came on the doorsteps of Broxton to Asgard proper and left the city in complete and total disarray. So no one here is too happy to see Thor. Everybody's not too happy to see him. They're kind of like, man, get out of here. Like, we really don't want to see you or your problems. Go away. It's kind of like my ex-girlfriend. Just get out of here. I'd rather not see you, like, for the rest of my life. And so because of this, Thor ends up just sort of making his way back to where the rest of the superheroes reside. But what this does is this transitions over to the Serpent himself, sort of talking about what's going on. Now, it's not a great big, huge, long explanation, but one thing that we're going to kind of do here is we're going to cheat a little bit. We're going to sort of cover this and then the next part, and then we're basically going to skip over the Uncanny X-Men and then come back to it in the next video that we'll make. So we're going to cheat a little bit. We're basically going to kind of skip over the part of Unstoppable Juggernaut. I kind of think Don't think we should, but we're going to. And in the next video, we'll cover that bit. But in any event, with everything unfolding the way it is, the serpent really just kind of gives us a synopsis of what he's done so far, which is to say what it is that he's shooting for. And all he's doing is powering himself by fear. And that's the whole basis. That's one of the things about normal humans in Marvel Comics. In Marvel Comics, when it comes to average everyday people, it's usually they're like the most annoying part of the story, because by and large they just get really scared and run away. But that's really the big thing that happens. Every once in a while, like a person might step up, but by and large they just kind of run and hide and let the superheroes do all the heavy lifting. And so in response to this, with humans being so timid in relation to like the greater universe out there, when a being of significant power shows up, they react with fear, and that feeds the serpent. At the same time, Odin is basically not only rebuilding Asgard, but essentially having the wheels of war prepared, having the Asgardians get to work on building more weapons, different things like that. Now, in reality, one of the things that people would ask is, why aren't the dwarves doing this? And in truth, is probably just to kind of push the story. The dwarves were really some of the greatest, weapons masters in the entirety of the Marvel universe. I mean, that includes like everybody. The dwarves make some of the best weapons. And so where Odin is going through and creating weapons similar to that, this is an Asgardian war. So it makes sense that Asgardians would be the one to build these things. So that's really what's kind of going on. Now, at this point, we transition to the aftermath of the death of Bucky. And it's kind of a cool thing because we end up meeting up really with classic Nick Fury. Now, of course, classic Nick Fury is always alive because he's classic Nick Fury. Why wouldn't he be? But with a question sort of asked, what is this happening here, and what's this serpent being that Bucky had basically talked about? Thor arrives and chimes in and simply says the serpent is a being that really only Odin knows about and is known about for quite some time. Now, something I want you to notice here is that Thor just kind of takes it with a grain of salt. He just sort of throws it out there because by this point it's to be expected, especially when you're Thor and you're dealing with things like this. It's par for the course. Odin doesn't tell the Asgardians everything, and it kind of makes sense because the Asgardians are like children for Odin. You don't tell your child everything because your child doesn't need to know everything. And so it's much the same way when it comes to Thor and Odin and the rest of the Asgardians. Odin houses a lot of secrets, and those secrets are really just his to keep and to let them out if time permits or if he wants to. And so with a situation like this, Thor knows enough to know the serpent is a very, very old enemy of Asgard, but that's really about it. But the bigger thing he hits on here is that the serpent is fighting with the full might of what's basically Asgardian power behind it. The longer he stays here, the more people are terrified, the more powerful he will become until eventually he returns to 100% full strength. And when that happens, it's going to be difficult for anybody to win. And so what we end up doing is basically picking up with Steve Rogers, who's kind of been kept in the background the whole time, and he's brought back out, basically redons the Captain America uniform, and it's business as usual. Now with him, it's kind of chiming in and saying, look, okay, where do we stand with everything? And he's given the whole rundown of everything that's happened so far. But Steve Rogers' response is, okay, well, we have to act. We have to do something. If we do nothing, the serpent will continue to get stronger. The serpent's power developing and expanding is not a result of the action of the Avengers or the superhero community. It's a result of fear. So if they do nothing, they'll basically be sitting on the sidelines while the serpent gets more and more powerful. Because of this, with the serpent drawing his energy and feeding on it more and more, ultimately he finally reaches his quote-unquote final form, if we had to give it that depiction, and it's basically a very young guy. And so it's kind of cool here because this dude is wielding an insane amount of power. I mean, it's crazy how much power he has. To give you perspective, when Captain America, alongside the mighty Avengers and the what's left of the regular Avengers, when they all show up here, they're basically doing their best to fend off as best they can, but they don't really stand much of a chance. Now, for a second, I want to sidetrack and I want to pick up with Iron Man. Now, Iron Man being here is actually kind of funny because he shows up to like the old ruins of Asgard, what used to be Asgard in Broxton, Oklahoma, and summons Odin. Now, that's one of the important things to bear in mind here. In Marvel Comics, it's entirely possible for anybody on Earth to contact Odin. Whether Odin will respond or not is totally up to him. That's one of the things to bear in mind. The idea of Earth, of Earth kind of being divvied up among these various deities, more or less, these godly beings, is somewhat of a misnomer. All the various godly beings that exist in real world religion exist inside the Marvel universe, and you can talk to any of them. I mean, you can try to contact any of them. You can contact Zeus, you can contact Odin if they want to listen to you, if they're willing to give you, any measure of attention. If they'll give you an audience, they'll listen to you. If not, then they won't. And so in this instance, Iron Man shows up and just screams out the name of Odin. And basically what happens is he gets drunk and then starts yelling at Odin. That's basically what happens here. It's kind of interesting because in order to get the attention of Odin, it's not really a sacrifice. It's not like you have to go to an altar, sacrifice a goat, and then dance around 9 times, say a prayer, and then Odin will respond. It's one of these things where it's like if you're worth listening to, then Odin will listen to you. And where Iron Man starts talking to Odin, it's kind of interesting because his response is, "I didn't actually expect you to answer." But the funny response that Odin gives Iron Man is basically saying, "But like you're a friend of Thor." Like you are one of Thor's teammates as part of the Avengers. It's the only reason why I'm talking to you right now. And so it's interesting because with Tony Stark basically being drunk and just yelling at Odin, one of the what he starts to talk about is the idea of how Odin is leaving the entirety of Earth's superheroes to fend for themselves. And Odin interprets this as Iron Man saying, I want you to give us your armies. Like I want you to give us Asgardians to fight on our behalf or to fight alongside us so we can protect the Earth. But Odin's interpretation is entirely wrong. And Iron Man picks up on this. When Odin's just kind of like, look, this is our fight.
Right, so I think
here, we'll fight the serpent once
we've got the turtle
you guys are dead.
ish, we've got the shell, we've got the pattern at least.
Response is, no,
it is kind of an armored
I
thing.
don't want you to fight on our behalf.
Maybe
I
a
don't
bit
want you
more
to fight in our stead. We don't want you
detail on there
to pick up the slack for us or anything like that. What I do for a living is I make weapons.
I use the pen and stuff, give it a darker lines, but
I don't want access to your soldiers. I want access.
I think it's
to
looking
your
too bad.
I want to blend as
not looking great. It's because it's a fantasy
technology.
animals, guys.
That's
It's
what I want. I want to
a
create
bit more
a whole
harder than
new
doing
slew of
something you
weapons
can
designed
sort of
to use
draw.
your power with my power and
It's like
destroy
just
the
a
serpent.
creation
It's
that
pretty cool.
is
And it's
literally
really
coming
awesome
out of my
because
mind
basically Iron Man
from
developed,
3 different characters.
Asgardian /
Again, if there's
slash
any animals that
using,
you would like
his
me
own
to try and
ingenuity
combine,
and so on and so forth. And it's entirely possible. I mean,
then let me
it's
know.
not like this is unfamiliar
Give me a
territory
challenge
to Iron Man. It is
for the
totally
new
different.
year.
But he's been a
Let's
friend of Thor's
let's
for
challenge
so long,
myself
he's
for trying
well-versed in
to
essentially just,
break out my
navigating the
comfort zone
using Asgardian
around
energy, or at the very least
on,
understanding how it works. I mean, he's made
because of
anti,
that.
he's made like Thor Buster suits in the past, so it's not entirely, something that he's entirely unaware of. But at this point, we end up having Thor, who had basically faced.
Yeah,
off
so
against
give me a
the serpent,
challenge.
and he was able. I mean,
What would you like to? What would you like me to try and
draw?
draw?
Challenge. The serpent saw him as somebody that could potentially get.
Or if there is a hero,
Thor face off against,
or
Ben
if
Grimm
there is
and
something
the
else, you know what I
Now, Thor
do
fighting
draw,
against
let
Ben
me
Grimm
know
is
that you would
pretty
like to
quick
see
and
more of
simple.
it
I mean, he's defeated
in the
pretty
comment
fast,
section.
and it's kind of interesting. Thor literally throws his hammer and summons it back. It summons it back to himself, and it punches a hole through Ben Grimm, much like you guys probably saw in the story of Infinity when Thor destroyed a building. But then he turns his attention to the Incredible Hulk, and this fight is hardcore. I mean, it is an absolute brutal, intense fight. I mean, it's balls to the wall, and it's cool to see because with these two guys, tearing through each other, it's literally blow for blow, punch for punch, hit for hit. But one of the things that Thor says, and this is a very, very big thing, one of the things that Thor says is, I can't beat you. Like, I know for a fact I've never been able to beat you. And the Incredible Hulk's response is, I always knew that. Like, I always knew that was the case. And that makes sense. I mean, the Incredible Hulk's strength is limitless. Thor's strength is not. So just by logic and reason, we know that Thor would not have been able to defeat the Incredible Hulk. I mean, in my mind, I think it really comes down to the Superman versus Incredible Hulk style fight, right? Like, that's one of the big debates. Can Superman beat the Incredible Hulk? Yes, unless the fight goes on long enough, and then the Incredible Hulk will just be too strong for Superman, and then Superman will be defeated. But, like, at the outset, maybe he can, maybe he can't. I don't know. It's probably a wash. I don't really care enough to argue the point. But with Thor, it's much the same way. If Thor nips it in the bud right off the bat, maybe he can win, maybe he can't. I don't know. It's a crapshoot. I mean, there's been fights where Thor's won, there's been fights where the Incredible Hulk's won. It really just comes down to which character you like the most. But at the end of the day, with this battle between the two, again, this is also taking place at the same time that everything's going on with, like, the Serpent and with Captain America and so on. This is kind of a big moment here in the Fear itself. And the reason why is because when the Serpent finally arrives, when he basically, picks up on the scene, you have, like, the Avengers, Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, all that kind of stuff, Luke Cage and so on, who try to combat him, and they all get dealt with quick, fast, and in a hurry. I mean, they're taken out right off the bat. They're not killed. They're all just basically knocked out right off the bat. And in turn, Captain America throws his shield to the Serpent, and the Serpent breaks it in half. Now, this is a very, very big thing, because the only time we've ever really seen this happen is, one, if it's a person with reality warping powers, or two, Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet. We've never seen a person by sheer strength alone shatter the shield of Captain America. That's never happened before, and that's a pretty big deal. The problem with this is that in reality, the event of Captain America's shield being shattered the way it was during Infinity Gauntlet really kind of overshadows this because the event was so significant. But essentially what's going on here is the Serpent has single-handedly dismantled the entirety of the superhero community. And this is kind of etching in stone that when the Incredible Hulk's knocked out into space by Thor, when he set flying, into the atmosphere and falls back down again, that it's really a stopgap measure. That's all this has ever really been, a stopgap. These guys are nothing more than just, bubble gum on a leaking wall. Sure, it stops it temporarily, but it's only a matter of time before the pressure builds up and that bubble gum gets blown out of the way, and that small leak turns into a full-blown flood. neutralized. So that's exactly what's happening here. They're just kind of in the way at the moment. They're really more of a nuisance than anything else. And that's basically what happens. Captain America chiming into Hawkeye, basically saying like, we have to stop, we have to stand down. And when the question is asked why, Captain America says, because we're going to lose. Like, look around you at everything you've seen. Like, Thor's defeated, the Avengers are getting wrecked to pieces. You know, the Incredible Hulk is a bad guy, Juggernaut's a bad guy, the Serpent shattered my shield with his own bare hands. Like, we're facing off against a force we could not possibly hope to defeat on our own. And so it's not very often you see Captain America do that. In fact, I've only ever seen Captain America turn tail and run twice. This is one of those times. The second time was Age of Ultron, when Ultron raised the entirety of Earth, and Captain America had just kind of given up. He was like, there's nothing we can do, until he realized, until he thought of Dr. Doom's time platform. And so, and you know, with those things in mind, Fear itself is an amazing story because it's basically like pushing the superheroes to the brink. It's presumably the end of all things. Okay, so we are finally getting back into Fear itself, and we're really covering in this part like the one tie-in that everybody cares about. Really, I would say the one part of the story that most people care about, which is the Uncanny X-Men tie-in, Unstoppable Juggernaut. So it's kind of funny. In these crossover events that Marvel will do, there'll just be segments where people are just like, so I don't care about anything else that happens, but I care about like that one thing. Because it's cool. Like that's okay. At the end of the day, that's really all comics boil down to, just the cool moments. Like that's really it. Like I could cover the entirety of like Chris Claremont's X-Men run, but there's only like a handful of super cool things that anybody would really care about. So like it's one of those interesting things in like comic book events and all that kind of good stuff. But in any event, switching over to the X-Men, this is all post-Utopia. Now, for those of you guys who are familiar with this, bear with me while I went over this for the guys who are not. Utopia in the X-Men landscape was basically after the events of Decimation, right? Like the Scarlet Witch took away 98% of the Mutant Powers population, and then you had an event called Dark Reign. So you had like Secret Invasion, where the Skrulls basically invade the entirety of Earth and the Marvel Universe. They start replacing superheroes, and so what ended up happening is Deadpool had actually sent information to the superheroes on how to defeat the Skrulls, and then Norman Osborn intercepted the information and then used it to win. And so that goes into Tony Stark being removed as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Norman Osborn becomes the new director. He disbands S.H.I.E.L.D., creates Hammer, and then he starts Dark Reign. And so in order to like consolidate his power, he basically started trying to get rid of like all these different groups. But then you have like the X-Men. And at the time, the X-Men were still living in Westchester, I'm pretty sure, and they were recovering from the events of Decimation. But realizing that Norman Osborn would seize the opportunity to basically oust them, what they did is they left the United States proper, that is to say the continental United States, and they took up residence on an island off the coast of San Francisco. So technically speaking, they were outside of the U.S. government's jurisdiction, but not really, and they were still considered to be part of San Francisco. Now, the way that this happened was actually by way of this chick, Sadie Sinclair. She's basically the one who invited the X-Men to stay in Utopia in San Francisco. It was kind of like a friend for the X-Men, but not really. She appeared in like 15 issues, so she never really had like any meaningful role. But with the X-Men residing in San Francisco and being on good terms with Sadie Sinclair, they basically brief her on what's going on so far. And one of the things that's really pointed out here, and this is pretty important. Man
Turtle! You haven't heard that, guys? Oh god, check it out. Just type in your search engine on YouTube, Mind Turtle, and you know what I mean.
Shall go forward forevermore.
Right, so we gotta come out. We gotta get a
unstoppable
parrot there already.
It's one of those things
got a turtle.
Once the
a monkey.
starts moving, nobody can really stop him, and he's invulnerable to pretty much every form of physical harm. The only way to really defeat him is to remove his helmet and then use a psychic attack or something along those lines. Because even with his helmet gone, conventional weapons still would work. He'd be bulletproof. They would just bounce off it. And so when it comes to something like this, what this does is it amplifies his power even that much more. And so it's basically the power of the Juggernaut with Asgardian tech, and it's insane what he's capable of. Not only that, he's basically amassed a whole bunch of followers, and this is really done more for like a ransom act, in the sense that earlier what had essentially gone on, or at least what happens here, is that when the X-Men launched the initial attack, it's really more of like testing to see what they can and can't do, because they don't really know what kind of power the Juggernaut has since it's been amplified. And so when Cyclops and company show up, it's the testing ground. They grab Colossus, they grab Kitty Pryde, they go through and they say, okay, look, like we've got to find a way to defeat this guy. And it kind of works for what it is. But initially, this initial skirmish is disastrous, because like all the X-Men are absolutely, they're decimated. Cyclops is manhandled with no real effort on behalf of Juggernaut. Iceman is taken out in the blink of an eye. And these are some Omega level characters. And so with none of them really being able to stand alone against Juggernaut, Cyclops essentially calls in and says, okay, look, we have more that we have to do here. So this, of course, leads to the arrival of Magneto. And it's one of the cool things because you would expect Magneto to be able to slow down Juggernaut or something along those lines. But after all, he is wearing metal, so why not just lift him into the air? But with the enhancements offered by the Serpent, this basically makes Juggernaut and his weapons immune to the powers of Magneto. And so where Magneto stands up and essentially tries to, like, you know, block or I guess catch the hammer of Juggernaut when he throws it, it just keeps moving towards him. Ultimately, it takes Kitty Pryde jumping in the way, phasing Magneto so that the hammer will pass right through him. Otherwise, it would have killed him. And this basically means that, like, there's no real way for the X-Men to stop him. That Juggernaut truly is unstoppable at this moment in time. And so what they do is they basically say, we need Hope Summers. Now, calling Hope Summers in is no small thing, but you're talking about a character who has the ability to duplicate the powers of anybody around her with no upper limit. And that's what she does. She literally goes through and starts tapping in to the powers. So she is basically a mutant with the powers of 1,000 X-Men, or I guess really like a couple hundred X-Men, who in turn is facing off against Juggernaut. And notice this, she does it by the skin of her teeth. What she ends up doing is seizing control of his helmet and then basically melting his helmet and pulling it off. And that's all she can do because the sheer number of power she's absorbed has been entirely overwhelming. Now, what this does is it allows Emma Frost to basically use Cerebra and then tap into the mind of Juggernaut. And notice this. This is one of the funny things. Emma Frost is very cavalier in how she does this, right? She's like, okay, his helmet's gone, whatever, I'll just use my telepathy that's, amplified several times over, and then just, shut his mind down or something along those lines. It doesn't work. Not by a long shot. Her psychic mind is effectively like fractured and destroyed. Like it's to the point where she's actually thrown temporarily into a catatonic state because she cannot begin to understand the sheer amount of energy, like psychic energy, rage, fear, anger, the whole 9 yards that Juggernaut.
Well, I want a banana.
Off at the moment. It's way more than she knows how to handle, and the Juggernaut moves forward. And so at this point, it's a matter of kind of running a conflict.
I have no idea.
Banana.
Banana.
Information, seeing if there's a way to defeat him. And the other part is
a horrible word.
A stopgap measure. And so what they end up doing is they end up traveling to meet Illyana Rasputin. Now, Illyana Rasputin is currently locked up in a brig inside the X brig is what it's called. And the reason for this is because shortly before this story, there was essentially the return of Legion. And the reason why the return of Legion has happened is because it was basically the Purgatory, Project Purgatory Saga. And it was this idea that after way old story.
All I want a banana.
When Jean Grey's clone Madeline Pryor had launched an attack on New York by unleashing demons from this, from basically like the netherrealm, basically, where Illyana Rasputin draws her powers. What Project Purgatory ended up doing was realizing this was a power source. And so what they started engaging in was what amounted to like gene splicing the genes of mutants with like demons, and then kind of trying to create their own army of sorts. But what happened was Illyana Rasputin had realized what was going on and the power that was available there, and essentially brought Legion in from a different dimension and basically brought him back to life. But because Legion is so mentally unstable, because he's so insane, he's a credible threat to everyone. That like his powers to warp reality are extreme. So with this kind of a thing in mind, Illyana Rasputin was basically considered by Cyclops to be a credible threat to the mutant community. So she was thrown in the brig. And so seeking out this information and asking her questions, she basically says, look, I can study this and I can take you to where you need to go, but you're going to have to let me out of this cell in order to do it. So it's a dangerous game that's being played. Something else is going on here. What we end up doing is kind of sidetracking for a second and picking up with some of these forces who are trying to stop Juggernaut, and none of it's working. Like you have Pixie who's creating like portals trying to get him to different locations, and he just walks right through as if they're not there. You've got Rogue who tried to like absorb the power of the Juggernaut way more than she could handle, and she ended up shutting down. No one can stop him. And so what ends up happening is they end up taking Illyana Rasputin basically out into the middle of nowhere. She creates a portal and transports everybody but Cyclops to the realm of Sidorak. Now, this is where things really get cool. So, Sidorak is one of the elder demons that existed in the Marvel Universe way back in the day, and was one of the people who retreated. He's also part of the Octessence. The Octessence was a group of super old entities that existed on Earth in the Marvel Universe. And the idea was they had a contest over which one was the most powerful. And so what they ended up doing is, because they couldn't really enter the main Marvel Universe dimension, what they ended up doing was basically creating artifacts, one for each one of these members of the Octessence, and they were placed around Earth. But the idea was that an individual would pick up one of these artifacts, and when they did, they would set the Octessence prophecy in motion. The Earth would be divided into eighths, like an eighth of the Earth's population would be an army for each one of these beings, and then in turn it would just be like a massive war, an end time kind of conflict, and whichever army proved to be victorious would show which member of the Octessence was the most powerful. And so during the Korean War, Kane Marco picked up the artifact that belonged to Sidorak, which of course was the Crimson Gem. But with Illyana showing up here, she plays it exceedingly smart. What she basically tells Sidorak is, Juggernaut is using power that is somebody else's. Now, when it comes to Sidorak, he's very much like the Old Testament God of Abraham, right? Like, I am a selfish God. And so do not use anybody's power before me. And that's how Sidorak functions. That's what he is, because the role that Juggernaut is playing is to serve explicitly for the avatar of Sidorak, the avatar of destruction. And so learning Juggernaut has accepted the power of another entity out there basically means that Sidorak strips Juggernaut of all of his power, basically takes away everything that Sidorak had given.
Sorry guys, I'm just sitting on Instagram. I was just making a quick post, tell everybody I'm still live, but I will be going very, very soon.
But the problem with this is
probably in the next 5 minutes. So if you have enjoyed this today, guys, thank you very much for watching. And this isn't finished, as always. Normally get the sketching done on a Monday.
Now, this is where things get kind of crazy too.
And this is the first back. I know I've gotten some out practice, as you can see. But I made a little scene.
By literally taking, like,
Second, so I can take the camera up. So I've made a little scene here, guys. Sort of. I'm just doodling, really. To be honest with you, on the first day. But I'm trying to combine the three animals. I'm not too happy with it, but it is three animals and it is a mutant, so it's not going to look pretty. But we've got the parrot up here. Sort of parrot. I think I'll sharpen that up when I ink it tomorrow, guys. Again, don't forget to hit subscribe and come back tomorrow, because I'll be inking all of this tomorrow, turning it into a proper actual picture. Today was just the concept idea, getting things in, and because I was a bit late, I've sort of rushed things a little bit. But yeah, we've got our monkey friend, we've got the parrot in, we've got the turtle.
And so what this means for Colossus is that he's following
my turtle. We've got the turtle in, and there's the first combine.
Is that in this instance, in this conflict here,
so it's got beak of the turtle, beak of the parrot, the wings of a parrot. Still, it was a bit too small to really put any detail in there. And the monkey arms and such, and making it look like a monkey, but with a turtle shell. That's all really defines a turtle with anything else, is the shell and the slow speed it moves. And then the larger version, which obviously is sort of monkey, same thing again, turtle shell and the wings of a parrot, which I'll have another look and see if I can find some more pictures of their wings and see if I can get them done. But yeah, hopefully you have enjoyed today's drawing, guys. Don't forget again to hit that subscribe button and come back tomorrow when I ink this and turn it into a full scene. My name is Blut084, BLUT084, Art and Games. I'm here every day on YouTube, occasionally on Mixer, but every day and night over on Instagram. I will be playing some more games later on, guys. I may be doing some VR art. I'm not sure, actually, to be honest with you. I think I probably will do some VR tonight and see what I can do there. I'll probably be listening to the same thing we are listening to right now. So if you want a link, guys, then don't forget to check down below or leave a comment if it's not there already. But I will try and put a link so you guys can get what I'm listening to here. But yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye for now. Hit those links, hit my face, and I'll see you again.
It was a practical approach, but Cyclops